Meeting of the Board of Commissioners Finance Committee to order at 11:23. Could we please call the roll?
Commissioners Rahman,
Present.
Long,
Yes, or here. Sorry.
Howell,
Here.
Cavell is absent with notice. Charles,
Present.
Wypert,
Here.
Hoffman,
Present.
Markham.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up, we have approval of the minutes from April 12th. I need a motion. Commissioner Hoffman, supported by Commissioner Smith-Charles. Any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, let's prompt the vote.
Wypert.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Okay, minutes are approved. Next up is approval of today's agenda. Moved by Commissioner Long, supported by Commissioner Rahman. Any changes, additions, deletions to today's agenda? Seeing none, let's prompt the vote.
Wypert.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Okay, thank you. Today's agenda is approved. Next up, we have our public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address this committee at this time? Seeing none, I will close public comment at this time, and we will move on to item number 7, communications. We have 5 items under communications.
Could I move A through E?
Moved by Commissioner Long, supported by
I'll support it.
Commissioner Wypert. Any discussion on any of the communication items? Seeing none, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Okay, excellent. All the communications have been received and filed. Next up, we have our departmental recommendations. Item 8A is the reorganization of Risk Management Department. And I see we have Dee McBroom with us this morning, so I need a motion from Commissioner Smith-Charles, supported by Commissioner Hoffman. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I followed the instructions in the agenda and appeared remotely, so I hope that the fact that I'm not in person, doesn't prejudice anyone. But anyway, so the reason I'm before you this morning is because since I joined the county in 2021. As you can imagine, there have been a number of changes at Risk Management in terms of various priorities of the county, as well as differing needs of the county from the personnel that's in risk. And in the interest of transparency and making sure we are working as efficiently as possible, I wanted to kind of look at the personnel in the 2 funds that provide personnel for risk management, the Fringe Fund and the B&L Fund, and kind of right-size those and have those positions reflect what the folks here actually do, because some of the job descriptions that we had didn't really match what people were in fact doing here on the ground. In addition, there have been some new projects here at the county, as well as regulatory changes on the federal and state level that have caused us to refocus and change some of the way we do business here. So, in short, we have eliminated a couple of positions. I want to say at the outset that no one I'm not downsizing, no one is losing their role here at Risk Management. I have eliminated those positions because we really don't have the need for them. And I have reclassified one position here from technical assistant to what's going to be called a claims specialist. That is someone who is here and works on the B&L side. They do a lot of claims processing for us, non-litigated claims. Chiefly, that's what she does. And she also serves as a second to our workers' comp claims specialist. One of the other priorities that I wanted to make sure that we were working on is having some redundancy in the department with respect to both skills, background knowledge, and background knowledge and training. There really was no one. There was no redundancy in with respect to our workers' comp piece. There's very little redundancy with respect to our insurance specialists. So, sort of for that business continuity goal as well. That's what I was looking to. In addition, we are adding a driver training and safety specialist, and that is a role for someone who will be serving to be the in-house trainer for commercial driver's licenses with respect to the field training only. So I know there's a bit of expertise on this council, on this board with respect to, truck driver and CDL training. So I want to be really clear about what we're doing here. Back in 2021, the federal government changed the way it permits any employer to train their CDL drivers, and you're required now to use a federally certified trainer. That did two things. Number one, it changed the way we normally did things here at the county. The way we did things was basically sort of on-the-job training. We had a part-time sheriff's deputy that would volunteer to go into the departments and help people, get trained up for their CDL, and then they could take the test and pass the test, et cetera, and then they could hold a license. Now we have to, and that person was unwilling to continue in that role with this new federal designation. And now the process is broken out into sort of a classroom session, which we will continue to outsource. And then the on-the-job training piece, which is what this person will be doing very substantially for our CDL drivers. Without this position, we pay between $3,000 and about $5,000 to get our CDL drivers trained. It's obviously necessary for some of the roles that we have in water resources and facilities and even parks and other departments. So with implementing this position, we can take that $3,000 to $4,000 and training a CDL trainer. A CDL training regimen would really only be about $800 at the very most, including all the testing. So we're trying to save a bit of money, but additionally, we're trying to save the time and the work energy for these positions, because frankly, sending an employee out for a 12-week training course when they're not doing productive work here at the county, also has a cost. So this person would be able to do that on-the-job training with them while they're actually doing their job in the department. In addition, this person will serve in a general safety role. It's a role that did exist here at the county before I was risk manager, but that hadn't been filled for a number of years. And I think you all know that we are working very hard to increase our culture of safety here in the county. We have established a new safety committee at the facilities department, and that is a big focus of Ed Joss and others in the leadership there. And we're working very hard to get the rank and file folks really engaged with that. We have reconstituted the safety committees at Water Resources, which had gone dormant, and we are working on reconstituting the Park Safety Committee as well. So there are a number of safety ongoing safety questions, concerns that require, quite frankly, a lot of time to resolve and look at and kind of be there present on the ground for employees to be a resource. So that is the second position. The third position is what's called a policy and compliance specialist. There are a number of initiatives in the county that had been started prior to when I came and that we're picking up now that this person will be focusing on. One of them is the ongoing HIPAA compliance that we need to continue with. As you all know, we spent a tremendous amount of money getting a framework in place for HIPAA compliance, and that framework really does require ongoing monitoring and auditing of our processes here in the county and making sure that we are compliant. It's not simply an online process. It involves a lot of human interaction. In addition, this person will serve as the behavioral threat assessment record keeper for that team as well, keeping those records appropriately here and making sure that the procedures are standardized. We have, in addition, they'll serve as the DEI liaison for risk management, which, as you know, is a big focus here. I think that we have just started to skim the surface as to the role that risk management could play in ensuring some DEI implementation. In addition, we have a number of policies and procedures that need to be updated, not only because of best practices, but because of changes in laws and regulations. Some of those are very outdated, and this person would be focused on those projects primarily as the researcher, the initial scribe, and then we would have to get it through the system in terms of getting approval either from HR or input from other departments. In short, I'm requesting the amendment for FY23, which is a net about $15,000 increase for these changes in positions. I guess I should have also mentioned, at this point, risk management has 3 part-time investigators. We have one full-time investigator and 3 part-time investigators. Those investigators serve chiefly to support HR investigations, some workers' comp investigations, and they also have executive protection duties. And in order to ensure coverage, we've had to cobble together over these last months kind of a few different, we've had to underfill some positions, et cetera. So this is kind of bringing everything into alignment. There's one person that sits at HR right now. We're bringing them back into risk management. So it's just kind of, frankly, creating more transparency about who works at risk and which pot they're paid from. So instead of 3 part-time employees at 1,000 hours, we really only need them for 500 hours. So I was able to save a little bit there. We need 3 people simply because of coverage issues. It's just really a matter of scheduling. So that's the one last thing I wanted to mention. But back to the dollar differences, for this year, it is about a $15,000 increase. And for this fiscal year, I think I'll be able to hire people to have them cover these positions for a portion of this fiscal year. For the ongoing costs, it's roughly $60,000 difference. Frankly, in terms of ensuring that we are MIOSHA compliant with a number of areas that MIOSHA is currently focusing, like hazard communications and SDS systems, and other areas. I think it is money well spent, and it will make sure that the priorities of the county as we see them in terms of these various projects and especially in the safety space, that we are doing everything we can to make sure that those programs are really as top-notch as they should be. So, questions?
All right. So I will go on Commissioner Weipert first, but any of the rest of you who want to ask a question, if you wouldn't mind requesting on the agenda. Commissioner Weipert, you
Thank
go
you. I'm
first.
not sure mine's working, but I think it is. Thank you for the explanation on the driver training. At first blush, I'm like, we need an employee to teach CDL, but now that you've gone through it, I mean, if employees are out for 12 weeks for training, we have to replace that or cover that, and the person will also do ongoing safety training for everybody.
Yes.
Okay. And you've run the numbers.
Oh yeah, for sure. To give you an idea, so the changeover in the federal changeover in training took place. The implementation of that was February 2021. Let me back up. I'm sorry, 2022. It was delayed a year. We had around the county at within 5 months, we had 6 individuals who needed to be trained, and it was, when you just do the math, it makes sense, at least for this fiscal year, right? And, frankly, we're going to continue to have more employees, as we have more and more turnover, need that training. And really a very big issue was that they couldn't do that road, that 20 hours of road and range. It's basically like driver's training. They couldn't do that if we were sending them out to an outside entity. And this training school was in Romeo, that was the very closest we could find. And so, it was a lot of time away from the job site for those employees. And we feel as though we're going to be able to provide that service to the departments as they, we don't typically have, 20 people needing training all at once. So with staggering it, we're going to be able to make that work, I think, with one person.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Powell.
Just clarity, so on the class period, when they say like 1 step, 12 step, what, is that like 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, is that what that is? I'm just asking for pay structure. Is that how they classifying this stuff and just saying, instead of saying 1 year, 2 year, like, it's like 1 step, 12 step. Kyle, can you come? Kyle, where you at?
Yeah.
This is what this is. This your wheelhouse. Is that what that is? Like 1 year?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Kyle checked you out. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know, that's all. That's all I had. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else? All right, seeing nobody else with a question, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
Good to know. Thank you. Learn something every day.
Yes.
Pardon?
I'll be yes.
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 Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, or?
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have item 8B, Information Technology Extension for 3 years with Kronos Incorporated for Workforce Central Licensing, Telestaff Licensing, and Clock Maintenance. Moved by Commissioner Smith Charles, supported by Commissioner Rahman. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Madam Commissioner and Commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present on the next 2 items. Before I do that, though, I just want to do 2 thank yous. Number one, I want to thank this committee and the board collectively overall. Last September, August-September timeframe, we came in front of this committee and then ultimately went to the board for a reorganization in IT. We asked for a chief information officer structure, and thank you for that approval. What that gave us is the opportunity is this gentleman to my left, Ken Tice, who's been our interim chief information officer since October, I believe. He has put Oakland County's IT on a new glide path since he's been here. Now, as you know, you all voted unanimously, I think at the last board meeting, for our new CIO, Rod Davenport, who will be starting May 8th. But Ken had two jobs when he came on, and one of those jobs was to find us a new CIO. He's retired. We were able to pull him out of retirement to come in and help us here in Oakland County. But he did more than just find us a new CIO. He turned over some rocks and created some new processes for this organization. And the second thank you goes to Ken. He'll be serving as the interim CIO until Sunday. You never know what happens with the IT system, so it's important for me to say Sunday versus close of business on Friday. But he'll continue on with the transition path. But he has done a tremendous job for this county, and I just wanted to make sure that we were recognizing him. So thank you very much. So thank you for that brief opportunity to do a couple of thank yous. I'm gonna turn it over to EJ in regards to the extension for the 3 years with the Kronos. And you wanna go ahead and take that?
So basically, Kronos is a scheduling software as well as time and attendance software that we use in several facets of the county. It right now handles the sheriff's department, the FM&O group, as well as Children's Village. And we're seeking an extension of this contract largely due to the complexities associated with it. It is integrated into Workday that helps these people with their staffing and their payments, as well as the fact that these rules sets that how you govern their pay are very complex and takes a long time to change out. So between the integration with Workday in addition to the complexity of the change, it is an easier path forward to stay the current course. And so we're asking for that request to have this extension.
Sorry, I gotta put this.
Okay. Any questions from the floor?
I put my name
Commissioner
on.
Long?
So I just, on Kronos, did we have them doing this before we had the workday also?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's it, yeah.
Anybody else? Commissioner Smith Charles?
Yeah, clock maintenance, people are like, with a,
There's an electronic time clock as well. So sometimes it's an electronic clock. There are some still physical clocks, I believe, in certain facilities.
and Kronos, or Chronos, however it's pronounced. Kronos is, they primarily are what kind of tech company?
They actually specialize in scheduling and time and attendance software.
Yeah, that's what
They
I'm,
are a market leader in this space.
yeah, that's chronological and all that kind
Yep.
of stuff. Okay, that's why I was checking. Yeah, I guess it's pretty brass tacks, thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Rahman?
Just out of curiosity, in terms of rate and kind of money changing hands, is there anything different between now extending this contract and kind of where we've been in terms of cost to the county?
There's not a big change to the cost of the county of the contract. This is just to keep the services running for the next 3 years with the extension.
Okay. I remember, and I can't find it now, but when I was reviewing the packet earlier, I saw something about a rate of like $400 an hour. Does that mean anything, or am I just making up that figure? I remember seeing something in the packet about $400 an hour. I don't know if that means anything to you.
I don't,
I do not know.
no, I do not know.
No? Okay.
You good? Okay. Anybody else? All right, seeing nobody else, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
Oh, wait, I do have a question.
Oh, Commissioner Smith
What happens
Charles.
if this doesn't pass?
The phone works, no, I'm just kidding.
We would actually
Then
then
we
have
get
to,
paid.
we'd actually have to find a way to figure out how to do time and attendance, and that would
In Workday.
in Workday, and we'd have to change the business process and reconfigure all those rule sets as well.
Okay, that helps my vote.
Well, and I think the real issue that's helps us avoid about a $450,000 implementation cost
That helps it as
from a
well.
cost avoidance perspective.
Thank you.
No, it works.
Let's prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have item 8C, the IT Development Second Quarter Report. Make a motion. Commissioner Rahman, supported by Commissioner Long.
All right, Ben's got this.
Yep, absolutely. So what this is really, this is a recap of all our development costs for the previous quarter. It's the work that we're doing for the departments and for the other different parties that are there. This actually takes the $1.499145 from the general fund and moves it into the IT budget. It takes approximately $805,000 from the special revenue and proprietary fund and moves it into the IT budget. And then for non-county agencies, it's about $5699 that are moving from that from their local funds into our IT budget. So it really is just moving transfer of money from the work that we're doing for the different departments, from the GF funds and those different funds into the IT budget itself.
Okay. Commissioner Powell.
So this is the IT department, correct?
Yes, correct.
Is Mr. Tim still with us?
Yeah, Mr. Jesse.
Okay, I was just making, I was just asking, that's all, because you know, he's usually here with the IT stuff, so I'm not
Absolutely.
saying you don't have other staff to do nothing, but I'm just used to, and I just, you know, I know employees be moving, so I just wanted to know, because I was gonna miss the guy, I really like Mr. Tim, so that, all right.
Anybody else? Seeing no one, let's go ahead and prompt the vote on this item. 8C.
Did you get mine? I got another one now.
I'm moving parts.
Vote towards.
I got another one.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0
I had
nays.
3
Okay.
votes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You needed my vote, I hear.
All right. Next up, we're going to have item 8D, fiscal year 2024-26 preliminary review estimates. I need a motion, Commissioner Rahman, supported by Commissioner Powell. I will, let's see, we have Kyle Jen here, right?
Good morning.
Are you the person?
I am the person.
I'm gonna step out for 1 second, but I will be right back. You may
Okay,
go ahead and do your
sounds good. Good morning, commissioners. This morning is kind of the kickoff of the budget process for the upcoming fiscal year and beyond. Staff has certainly been busy with a lot of technical work behind the scenes, but you always start with revenue first, and then decide how to spend those dollars and make sure we're balanced. So I'm bringing you an overview of our preliminary revenue estimates for the general fund. This is just informational at this point, but these are the estimates that we're going to use to produce the recommended budget that we will transmit to you in July. So this is a fairly long presentation. It's longer than I would have liked, but I want to make sure you have all this information as we move forward. So I'm going to try to go through it fairly quickly, but obviously feel free to jump in if you have questions or something isn't clear.
All right, let's go.
All right, so we're going to start with
Here we are. All right. We gotta get ready for this report.
okay, I hope that's excitement and
We gotta stay excited here.
With sarcasm and excitement.
Not information.
all right, so we'll start with an overview of the key economic indicators and real estate indicators that we're tracking that inform our revenue estimates. Inflation obviously, continues to be in the news, but is starting to come down. This chart shows in 22 the spike up above 8% in inflation nationally. And then what the, kind of the spectrum of forecasts from economists going forward. So you can see, everyone's in agreement it's coming down. It's just a matter of how quickly and how low. So for 23, which would affect our 24 revenue estimates,
What is?
it's in the 4% range.
Gwen, can I do this? What is the inflation rate right now? I was just gonna look that up yesterday. What percentage?
So the calendar year that ended in December, it was 8% plus. The
Okay.
forecast for the current calendar year is roughly 4% plus or minus.
Oh, okay. 8.6 last I looked. That's why I was asking. Okay, thank you. I just gotta look that up yesterday.
So obviously that's had an impact on mortgage rates, and mortgage rates remain above 6%. They're down from that peak of 7%. I think most forecasters are expecting them to move back down to the 5% range over the next year or so. But that obviously has an impact on house sales and house prices. So some indicators on, in terms of home real estate activity. These charts are a little hard to process, but you know, it shows the change over the calendar year. Obviously, things are always, you know, in the housing market is always seasonal. So this is a way to kind of see what's happening across the year. The red line is last year, 2022. And then the dark gray that just has 3 months is the beginning of this year. So I would focus on those two lines compared to prior years. So in terms of listings, we're down, you know, below where we've been for the last 4 or 5 years. You know, I think mortgage rates are affecting that in terms of people aren't moving, and therefore housing, you know, houses aren't going on the market at the same rate. In terms of average days on the market, you can see the red line for the first half of last year. You know, we were at, you know, extremely fast in terms of houses turning over. You can see the red line has crept up, and the dark gray now, you know, we're starting to trend up, you know, back toward historical norms, but things are still moving fast when they do hit the market. So all of that affects sales. Again, the red line you can see, we're down. And the gray line, we continue to be down, you know, from prior years in terms of the amount of sales. That affects our revenue because when a house sells, you know, the taxable value pops up to the assessed value, and factors into increased revenue that way. And then in terms of prices, I mean, this is kind of the good news from a revenue perspective, at least. You know, the red line and the gray line, you know, prices are still holding, you know, despite the higher mortgage rates, you know, because of that constricted supply. So, you know, to the extent houses are selling, you know, those prices are still quite healthy. You know, a quick look at property forfeitures. You know, we're still at very low rates here, particularly if you go back to the Great Recession. That's you know, that's in part due to the federal assistance that's available out there, but this is not a, you know, a headwind that we're too worried about right now in terms of the impact on the broader market. So in terms of looking forward, you know, another key factor in terms of our tax base is how much new construction is happening. So we use housing permits as a leading indicator of, you know, how much can we expect to be added to the tax rolls over the next year or two. You can see, you know, for 2020 and 2021, you know, sort of the two COVID years, things actually held up quite well in terms of housing permits in the county. For 22, we finally saw, I think, those supply chain and labor issues start to hit, and a decline from 2,000 to about 1,600. And then through the first 3 months of this year, which is just the blue bars, we're down from prior years. So we are keeping an eye on that and, you know, assuming a lower level of new construction going forward. The good news on the right-hand side, you can see the average amount for each housing permit by county. And, you know, Oakland is kind of bucking the trend here in terms of, you know, an $88,000 increase in the average value of the permit. So, you know, perhaps not the best thing from a housing policy perspective, but from a revenue perspective, you know, the houses that are being built are more expensive.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop you right there.
Yep.
Commissioner Smith Charles had a question.
Yeah, HBA, Housing Board of Authority or something.
Home Builders Association of Southeast Michigan.
And I noticed it was a lot about single family. It's probably more at the municipal level, but you know, like I was mentioning a couple meetings ago today, that there are just that missing middle that Gretchen and others in Lansing are trying to fund, you know, two and 3 and 4 family units. And, you know, I see it's nice that we're having development happen because I wasn't sure anyone was building anymore. But they're building single family and a lot of the people can't even buy single family in Oakland County. So just as we continue to talk to developers and stuff like that, like just really trying to, it's about zoning. I heard zoning is a big deal, but encouraging them to build the triplexes again, the duplexes again, which I think were like outlawed in the 80s and 90s for whatever reason. So I like that we're building, but I'm scared that we're building single family by and large across the county.
Yep, certainly an important policy issue. So, you
The
know,
only reason we look at these building permits is we look at it as a barometer of indicator in health, just like, excuse me, site plan approvals as a barometer of future building permits. We do have access to other type of building permits, except when you look at multifamily, they include all kinds of different permits, like electrical permits in there. So you get a real skewed result. So they'll have a lot more permits, but it's not for just multifamily home permits. So it's not a really good indicator of health if you look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Charles, and I will just second what she's poking at. We've talked about this before. We really do need to start thinking of a strategy here in the county to encourage developers and the local communities to take this on, because I happen to live in a community where building is going on. I see houses being built all the time, but they're like $800,000 homes. And that's not solving the problem of the missing middle. So, yeah, I do think, I just want everybody to keep that kind
yeah,
of
certainly a
spending.
top, I know, within the ARPA context, that continues to be a key consideration. And, the housing trust fund that the board has approved and the county's in the process of standing up is certainly targeted toward that. So,
It's all good.
not lost on us. So key uncertainties going forward, obviously I'm not gonna read all these, but, we track these on a monthly basis. Michael and his team update all these charts and even more of them on a monthly basis. And we're tracking them, to make sure that we're on top of any changes that affect our revenue going forward. So in terms of how those things affect property tax values and revenue estimates, this is just a glossary of the key terms. For your reference, we'll talk about these as we go through. Proposal A, I think everyone's familiar, but it's always good to have a refresher in terms of, taxable value for a homeowner, where the property hasn't changed hands, can't go up by more than the rate of inflation from the previous fiscal year. This is an unusual year we're in now because inflation, was at that 8% mark last year. It's been capped at 5% in terms of how much things can go up. So, that's the first time that's happened, since Proposal A was implemented. This is just an example of how that looks for two homeowners of, basically equivalent houses in the same areas. At the bottom there, the taxes are $2,000 higher for the house that has been sold recently. So Proposal A is certainly accomplished, I think what it was intended to do in terms of predictability for the taxpayer. But in terms of our tax revenue, obviously that constrains the growth that we've had over the last 20 years. So last meeting, Michael was here to talk about the equalization report. So this is a bit of a rehash of that, but just a reminder in terms of what our tax base looks like. We are across the full county, 75% residential. So that's why we focus mostly on those residential indicators, but the commercial, industrial, and personal is significant as well. So we are tracking that. I didn't include slides here just for the sake of time. One question that often comes up is what's going on with office space. And certainly, there's weakened demand for office space. I think the recent vacancy rate is like 25%. But it's important to note that office space is only about 4% of the total. So it has an effect, but it's not a key driver of our overall numbers. These are just charts from the equalization reports showing how taxable the value growth has occurred across our localities. This slide is townships. You can see everybody is at least 6% because basically they got the 5% growth, from the proposal ACAP, and then any growth from housing sales and new construction is on top of that. Same thing for cities. At the very bottom there, you can see that the growth across the full county is 7.5%, which is the highest level it's been since proposal A. And this chart shows that the orange bar is taxable value growth, so you can see 7.5% at the very end there. The green bar is state equalized value, so assessed value growth. You can see that in general taxable value doesn't go up as fast as assessed value because of proposal A. And this shows that gap that's been built up during the Great Recession. Assessed values fell with the housing crash, and assessed value and taxable value were basically the same number for the county. You can see the gap that's grown over time since then. This is taxable value additions and losses. So the additions, the blue bars, are basically new construction. You can see, still strong growth from that in 2022 and 2023, but we're not expecting that growth to be as high in future years based on that housing permit data we looked at. The Headley Amendment is the second key thing that affects our tax rate and our revenue. In a year where our growth adjusted for additions and subtractions exceeds the rate of inflation, we have to roll back our tax rate. This is an unusual year because inflation was so high. We're not going to have a Headley rollback for 2023. You can see that there. So the tax rate of 3.9686 that was in place last year will remain the tax rate for 2023, but then going forward, we expect those rollbacks to continue. So this shows you our property tax projections at this point for the general fund. The slightly darker shaded line is 2023. So that's this year, affecting our fiscal year 2023 revenue. And then the darker line is, is the estimates we'll be using for the 2024 budget. You can see in the far right column, there's that 7.5% growth for 2023 because of the taxable value growth and no Headley rollback. We're still expecting, fairly strong growth in 2024 of 5%, but then we're using cautious estimates on inflation and housing sales and construction going forward, so we fall back into the 3 to 4% range in the years following that. This shows you how that translates into actual revenue and the history on that going back to the beginning of Proposal A. So we have now climbed back to above our peak prior to the Great Recession. Before you adjust for inflation, when you adjust for inflation, the county is still about 25% below where it was before the Great Recession in terms of total revenue collected. So to kind of summarize everything I just went through, very strong taxable value growth of 7.5% for 2023 for the reasons we discussed. Those factors increase our revenue estimates by about $4 million for the current year and by about $6 million for future years. But obviously, we still have the constraints going forward in terms of the Headley rollback. So very good news for this year. We just don't want to bank on or expect that continues in the future years. So we're focused mostly on the general fund today. But we do obviously have two other countywide millages at this point. So these are the estimates for the parks millage and the transportation millage. You can see that, it's the same path in terms of percentage change. It's the same tax base. It's just lower tax rates. Again, for the current year, there won't be Headley rollbacks. So the parks millage will stay at 3.431, and the transit millage will stay at the original 0.9500, but then we see the Headley rollbacks for those as well going forward. All right, so let's talk a bit about the total general fund. So we are at this point estimating Total general fund revenue for fiscal year 2024 of $547 million. The property tax that we just talked about is well over half of that at 56%, but we do receive revenue from state and federal sources. That's primarily state sources with a little bit of federal, and then charges for services, for the local patrol contracts that the sheriff's office has, and other services that the county provides either to residents or to local units, and then some transfers in from other sources make up the rest of it. This is the detail on all of those sources in terms of what we're estimating for 24, 25, and 26 compared to the current amounts in the 23 budget. I won't go through those in detail. You'll see it's fairly moderate growth at the bottom there, as all of our sources, our other sources aren't growing at the same rate as the property tax. Just to highlight a few key things, we are looking at 3 healthy increases from the state right now in terms of revenue sharing. We're obviously waiting for final budget action at the state level. For now, we're assuming 5% ongoing, which is the lowest of the 3 versions of the budget right now. The Convention Facilities Development Fund, because of substantial increases in liquor sales over the last number of years. There was some legislation last December to sort of rebase that and redistribute it, both for convention facility purposes in Detroit, but then also the distributions that go out to the counties out of the fund. So we're looking at an increase of $4.6 million a year, of which just under $1 million will be passed through to OCHN for substance abuse treatment, which is a requirement in the statute. The marijuana tax, obviously with the growth in that market, that number is now up to just over $1 million. So all positive news there, but not necessarily news we can expect to continue. I think it's a jump up, and then it remains to be seen what happens with those sources going forward. Charges for services, the estimates in the county clerk and register of deeds budget are coming down to $2 million a year. That's because of the sources in her budget that are based on real estate activity and mortgage activity. So it doesn't have anything to do with her collections. It's just a function of what's happening out there in the real estate market with lower sales and lower numbers of mortgages, particularly on the refinancing side. The circuit court is a $1.7 million reduction. The bulk of that is from the board and care policy change that we talked about at the last meeting, which is offset by reductions in positions and an increase in state reimbursement. So that was not unexpected. And then the district court is about $1.9 million lower in terms of estimated charges for services because of lower caseloads and some policy changes at the state level. And then investment income, one positive thing about the increase in inflation is that the interest rates, that we're earning on our cash investments are up. Still very conservatively invested, obviously, but there is a bump there. Let me just pause there as I've talked through all the revenue side here to see if there are any questions.
Commissioner Powell.
Can you give me an example of what is an indirect cost recovery? What is that? What is an item or something we've done in that capacity? So I just hear our leadership reference that, and I just want to get clear.
Right, so indirect costs are, for all of the sort of central service departments that the county has that are funded by general fund. So that would include, fiscal services and management and budget. There's a calculation done each year to say, well, how much did all the other departments utilize those services? So for example, how much did the Parks Commission and Department utilize our central services? And then there's an allocation that's made out, so that Parks is paying their share of those central costs, and that shows up as revenue in the general fund, even though it's really just a cost allocation of, the cost of providing those services.
Okay. I think I get it, but okay. If not, I'll call you.
We can have a very lengthy discussion about this one.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner
And
Whitmer.
investment income, I was surprised at one of the last reports that they weren't doing CDs last year, right? CDs were paying nothing, now investment income, CDs are, could be a new investment tool again, you know. For years, we had the seniors,
1%, no, I'm just kidding.
so I see that going up.
Yep.
Investment income.
Any other questions before I move on? All right.
Just,
Yep.
Mr. Lohmeyer's point about 25% of the office space is or is vacant right now. Just to touch back on that subject that Commissioner Smith Charles brought up, are we talking to anybody about redevelopment of some of these organizations? And, you know, that's not a discussion for this necessarily, but it's certainly something, when you're out in the world talking to folks, we got all these empty buildings and homeless people, you know, they should be related. So, anyway, philosophically, that's my thing.
So,
Hello, Commissioner.
Hello, how are you? I'm watching from afar, but I mean, can you go back to like the slide about, yes, the charge for services? That's not, is the 2 million the reduction or is the projection $2 million for Register of Deeds? That's lower than what it currently is.
I mean, these are comparing budgeted amounts. The revenue collections on the Register of Deeds side have been well in excess of the budgeted amounts the last several years, so the actual decline is steeper than what's shown here. We weren't budgeting for that, the spike in terms of, you know, all the housing sales and mortgage refinancings that have happened over the last few years.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, like, in these numbers, that's not the reduction amount, that is like what we expect the charge for services for the circuit courts is supposed to be, is 1.7.
Right, this is just a change in the estimated revenue, it's nothing on the expenditure side, is that what you're?
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry, so last year, is this a 1%, 3%, 5% reduction? I guess I'm trying to read these numbers, the 2 million, the 1.7, and the 1.9, those are estimated revenues for this year? I guess how does that compare?
For 24.
Yeah, I mean, basically the sentence reads 2 million reduction due to.
Right.
Is it a $2 million reduction or is it the estimate?
So it's the estimate, I mean, it's the change in the estimated revenue included in the budget.
Got it, okay.
So you can see, you know, those dollar amounts vary in terms of what they are as a percentage. So the county clerk Register of Deeds had a total estimated revenue for the current year of 18 million, so we're bringing that down by like 11%.
Got it, okay. Good, that was the question.
Anybody else? Will we move on?
All right, so, you know, you're gonna hear lots more about the budget over the next few months, but I just wanted to make sure we're reframing our goals for the budget and what some of the key pressures are, you know, so you've heard the good news on the revenue side now. I'm gonna give you, you know, some of the bad news that we have to account for on the expenditure side. This is a slide I think you've seen every year, you know, since Dave Coulter became county executive in terms of what our goals are for the budget each year. I'm not gonna repeat all of those, but you know, just highlighting that we continue to be on track and keep these front of mind as we're building the budget, including, you know, the goal of being structurally balanced with each adopted budget, that our ongoing expenditures don't exceed our ongoing revenues. So I won't read everything there. It's my favorite. You know, these two slides are my favorite slides, but I'm not sure it's true for everyone. You know, this is the plan that we adopted with last year's budget with your help, where we, you know, for the first time in recent history, were structurally balanced in the budget that was adopted by the board. We had $503 million in estimated revenues and $503 million and estimated ongoing expenditures. You see in future years, you know, we start to show, you know, fairly small surpluses, but a surplus is certainly better than a shortfall, and these numbers will be adjusted, you know, for the revenue estimates that you just saw. So in terms of our general fund balance, our annual comprehensive financial report was just released on Friday. That's on our website for anyone who wants to take a look at it. our fund balance to close out fiscal year 2022 is at $220.8 million. That is down $68 million from 2021, which is obviously a substantial decline, but it's a little misleading for the two reasons, indicated there. One is that the Raffaelli, the cost of settling the Raffaelli related costs, where we had been reserving funds within the fund balance specifically for that. So $42 million of that decline was for that purpose. And then secondly, there's almost a $24 million decline that's really just a paper loss. So, and we could talk at length about this too, but our cash investments, when interest rates spiked up, we have to, under accounting standards, mark the value of our investments to the market value. So if you were trying to sell those investments right now, how much would they be worth? And we had to account both for the general fund and for the ARPA funds we hold, what that loss is. Now, the reality is we're not trying to sell those investments right now. The treasurer is going to hold those investments to maturity. And if they were, going to earn a 1% interest rate, we'll get the 1% back on the back end. So that $24 million loss over the next 2 to 3 years will be regained in the fund balance, in terms of the accounting transaction. So I hope that makes sense. So at the end of the day, even at that $220.8 million, our fund balance is still equal to 44% of our ongoing general fund budget. So that's well above our target level of 30%. This chart shows you how that $228 million is allocated through fund balance assignments. We'll be bringing to you with the second quarter forecast some adjustments to true these up, but this is what we're going to be suggesting to you. Key is the budget stabilization reserve, which is, under the policy that was adopted 2 years ago, is at 25% of our annual budget. So that's $125.5 million. The fund balance says we're not going to touch that under any circumstances unless revenues fall significantly in some future years. And then $25 million for the non-economic risks, sort of the unknown unknowns, and that gets us to the 30% target level. So once you account for those things and the other smaller things listed here, that really only leaves $32 million bottom line that we could consider spending on some future investment. It would need to be a one-time investment, and it would be, it would need to be something with long-term return on investment for the county. The AAA bond rating, is something we continue to focus on as an outside evaluation of our financial strength and our financial policies and processes. Last April, the policy was reaffirmed. S&P in particular, sort of highlighted these changes while making the budget process to make it more transparent and ensure structural balance. We don't have a need currently, to borrow and get a rating. We did meet with the rating agencies last month just to keep them updated on everything that's going on and make sure we have open lines of communication about all these things. So, some of the key budget pressures that we're going to have to account for in the budget and keep our eye on as we move forward. Employee compensation, obviously that's the largest category of expenditures in the budget. We have a planned 30% general salary increase for the upcoming year. That creates a general fund cost of about $9 million. Healthcare costs continue to rise. The administration, with your assistance, has put some measures in place to try to reduce those costs, but just the national trends as we come out of the pandemic, we're projecting growth of 7% a year. We have a series of costs sort of created by COVID in terms of services that jail trustees were providing that we no longer have the capacity to provide, that we're doing through contractual purposes or county employees. That's about $3 million a year that we're going to have to start phasing into the general fund budget. IT is always, a growth area for any large organization. Legal risks, I think everyone's aware, that the county has been served with multiple federal lawsuits for folks whose convictions have been reversed. So Corp Counsel obviously is working with outside counsel on those cases, but if you read national stories, those cases can, depending on how they play out, have significant price tags. And then facilities. And I think everyone had the chance to hear this presentation, so I've just put these slides in as a reminder. But in terms of the outside assessment that was done by Plant Moran, they did come up with a total of $864 million in potential spending over 10 years. That includes $550 million for sort of non-discretionary things, so roofs, parking lots, HVAC systems, and then over $300 million for, various discretionary facility projects that county leaders are interested in. So that, continues to be a focus in terms of prioritizing, what's most important from an operational standpoint, which things fit into a long-term plan, accounting for land use and remote work and reducing long-term energy costs. Just for discussion purposes, again, as a rule of thumb, for every $100 million we would borrow, that creates annual debt service costs on a 20-year term of $7.5 million per year, which we would need to figure out how to fit into a structurally balanced budget. All right, and then last slide is just the calendar with some key dates, with the bolded, lines being what we're driving toward within the administration to get you a recommended budget in July and let you, take over with your process from there. And with that, I'd be happy to take any final questions.
Commissioner Powell.
Isn't with the building, the building, project, aren't we looking to, you can answer this too, Chair, aren't we looking to eventually probably real estate some of this stuff? Like sell it, like if we can, are we looking for that based on how our workers may be using our buildings now? Like if we need them or so, are we considering any real estate with them? I just want to know.
I think Kyle and anybody else can
Sorry.
speak to it, but obviously if there's space that's not being used that could be sold to another entity that helps fund this $800 million, your $1 billion line item, so.
Now, do we have a group or something kind of studying that, or is our executive, we have a group studying this usage?
Yes,
and how we, okay. I just want to know.
We're still very early, I think, in terms of being able to talk about selling property, but
Right.
Front of mind is
Like,
how do we
that's just an
reduce
option,
fund,
right? It's
how
an
do we
option.
reduce our footprint? How do we reduce energy costs? Let's make sure we're not spending money on buildings that we don't expect to be using 10 years from now. So all of those things are key considerations.
Okay, good to hear.
Ed would be happy to talk about this.
Did you want to say anything about it?
Not necessarily, I can, so I was out there and I just heard.
He's like, what do we do?
Well, I posed a question just to see where we're at with things, as far as looking into this, like starting to have these discussions as to what buildings will we use, based on our workforce capacity. Is it buildings we don't need anymore? Like, it's not saying you all have yes, that's what we're gonna do, just is it in the discussion? Is it something we're looking at as an option?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
That was a simple one. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I can expand if you want, but yes, we.
No, yeah, you can,
Give us a 1
give
minute
us, what you,
rundown.
let's hear from you.
Yeah, so we have, we've been working, as Kyle mentioned, with Plant Moran Cressa. They helped us evaluate all of our spaces, met with all the departments to determine what their needs are now in today's world, right? With the option in some locations to work remotely. And so we have that information. As Kyle mentioned, we also are looking at, close to $1 billion worth of, I won't say needs because some of that is discretionary, but there's a lot of non-discretionary stuff. So we're simply in the process of just trying to prioritize that. And through that process, some departments may move around, those that can reduce space, and that will help us determine if there is a building or two that we might be able to take offline. So it's all like top priority for us. It's all on the radar. We are working through it. It's a very complex endeavor, and it seems to have just multiple facets that are all connected to each other. So we're working through it.
All right, thank you. Good, thank you.
And on that subject, you know, we said we wanted to do this about 3 years ago, start down this path. We're actually setting an example for the rest of the county as well. I mean, lessons you're learning doing this, you're gonna be able to share with other municipalities and so on. Because if we're gonna address climate change, this is a big piece of it, and it's not an easy thing to tackle. And I really appreciate that you have taken this on and are serious about it and making progress. 800 and some million dollars isn't very pretty, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else have any questions for Kyle? Really? No questions for Kyle? Oh, Commissioner White.
So you mentioned we met with the bond rating agencies, but you made a comment, since we're not anticipating borrowing, we didn't have to get a rating. Does the rating just continue?
Yeah, we continue to be rated at the AAA level, and unless, until we would ask for a new rating, and certainly our goal and expectation is that we'll continue to maintain that AAA, but nothing will formally change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there are no more questions, let's prompt the vote.
Okay, to receive and file.
To receive and file.
Okay, Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have item 8E, which is the approval of the 2023 county tax levies. You need a motion? Commissioner Hoffman, supported by Commissioner Smith-Charles. And let's see. Is this Mr. Lohmeyer, or you keep
I can
taking it,
handle this
Kyle?
one as well. So this resolution authorizes the levy of the tax rates that we just talked about for the general fund, the Parks Fund, and the Transit Fund. As I just mentioned, those tax rates remain unchanged from the 2022 levels.
Okay, any questions or comments? Seeing none, let's prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next 3 items all fall in the category of special projects. I'm wondering if we could take them all together? Anybody have a reason we shouldn't? Okay, let's take items F, G, and H together. I'll take a motion from somebody.
Make a motion.
Commissioner Wiper?
F, G, and H.
Supported by somebody raise your hand. Commissioner Woodward? Okay. So are there any comments or questions on these 3 items? Commissioner Rahman?
So I brought up in caucus last week or 2 weeks ago, I'd just like for there to be some guidelines about kind of how we're using these funds. I know they are discretionary for kind of special projects, things like that. I don't know currently what exists. I've kind of poked around, and from my understanding that there is not maybe a whole lot of definition as far as what we're doing. So I guess that may be the one thing that, I would encourage as a board, that maybe we should come up with some guidelines to delineate how we want to use this, because I could very easily see this becoming every commissioner trying to pull their $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to do something in their neck of the woods. And I don't know if that's really the design of these funds, or again, I don't know enough about it, but that's just kind of my outside perspective looking at it.
So there is a procedure that has been written by this guy.
Yep.
Right here, that talks about what these, you wanna kind of walk us through that?
Hello, everyone. Mike Keys with the BOC team. And obviously, Commissioner Rahman, I had sent that over to you. Last year, the Finance Committee did adopt a loose set of guidelines on what the projects should be and how they should be brought to the committee. The way that it works is a commissioner goes ahead and fills out the special project request form. We take that information and with Commissioner Markham, sometimes have to create a work group to find out if it's something we're actually allowed to do within the authority of the county. Other times, there's some of these, like you'll see today, some of the sponsorships that we know we're allowed to do, and we work with Corp Council to have those contracts, so we're able to bring them before the board even quicker than those that we might have to do that work group with. And then the Finance Committee inevitably forwards it on to the full board. And so we could certainly bring those guidelines back to the committee to enhance them at any time, and I'd be happy to do that.
I think that's a good ongoing conversation because when I got on the board, there was none of that. And so now we're iterating it so that it does make more sense. I understand this in kind of two buckets. One is the one like the bocce tournaments and the kite festivals and so on, which are sponsorships of local events in our communities. And they're generally between $5,000 and $25,000 kind of things. And we do it every year, okay? And that's one aspect of it. A second aspect of it is if a commissioner comes with a project that is kind of a one-time deal out there, again, we try and keep the dollar figure relatively small, but we also are looking for partnerships with that. We don't just want to throw money from the commission out into the community without some sense of, you know, who's working with us on all of that. So those are really the two general buckets. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, but that's generally the two different ways we look at these. And sometimes we might bring a special project, especially if it's a little more expensive, that actually ends up getting diverted to a different way to pay for it that makes more sense in the long term. And I think that happened with the skate park in Pontiac. That came originally as a special project. It was $125,000 or something like that. And then some other places to find that money emerged and we didn't end up using it as a special project, so.
Sorry, one quick follow-up. Do we want to set it aside for the bigger projects? So for instance, I know you did the water fountains, you know, a few years ago. It was a special project, right? Or I think Commissioner Gershenson initiated the gun buyback program and things like that. Are we looking for things sort of on that more of a global scale, or is it more for, and the reason I ask is because my communities approach me and say, hey, look, we're doing a summer concert series, you know, can you kick in money for that? Or we're doing a 4th of July parade, can you kick in money for that? Can you just, at least for me, clarification on whether we want to do these as smaller projects or bigger ones, or maybe a combination of both?
My take on it is yes and yes, but
Yeah,
Commissioner Woodward.
Can I?
You first and then I'll jump.
So, let me say this. If you get approached on anything that you think is worthy as your commissioner, say, you know what, I want to help in this space and see. Bring it forth. All the commissioners can do is say yes or no. And it's first come, first serve, so the quicker you know, submit it. And then, but I can say graciously, we've all worked together and most of our projects, we figure it out, right? And I think too, from a budgetary standpoint, because some of the stuff is automatic every year. We know certain things like Arts, Beats, and Eats and the kites. Like some of these been on here for so many years that it's already kind of embedded, right? We know that this money. So all I have to say to you, because they know I always bring stuff. So, and it's been large and it's been small and in the middle. So just submit it to my key. As soon as you got it, it go through that process and all they can say is yes or no.
Sure.
Yep.
We say yes or no.
Yeah, we say yes or no.
Well, and then there's the execs that can also say yes.
So one thing, sorry, I don't mean to.
No, that's good.
One other question that came up was whether we're supporting for-profit or non-for-profit events. That was something that was brought to my attention as well. So I don't know if that also falls within this realm of conversation or discussion or.
That's a dating question.
So I guess, I want to, answer this at a high level, and I've talked to, the chair about this, and I've also talked to the executive office in terms of like, how do we show up for our sponsorship? Because, everything in the world, to your point, Commissioner Robin, that, there's a finite number of these resources. And so for the next budget process, like something for the finance committee to consider is like on the sponsorship side, that we break out like a sponsorship line item, and then let's figure this out. Sponsoring every firework show that happens across Oakland County, we'll deplete that in a second. It'll be done. And so I think it is important to be strategic. I think it falls along placemaking. I think scale, where our stuff makes a difference. If it helps like make sure that this event can happen, if it brings in other economic activity. Those are like, I think those are the policy questions that are appropriate to ask. As Commissioner Powell said, that ultimately we have to get a majority of the board and the executive to agree. And there's been talk about like, well, what events do we sponsor, which ones do we don't? I think it is important that commissioners, they bring like, this is important. We can't do all the things, but this is important and here's why. And then we get some sort of consensus, and that's how we've generally operated. So that's one thing. On the special projects, this is one that, I will like press everyone to like, what's the sustainability of this? What's the, how much additional dollars can we leverage? If we have a pot of money this big and we have two choices, which one gives the biggest impact? We've got to figure that out, together. I genuinely try to push us to think of like big things that are sustainable, that help the most people. And sometimes it's going to be a small thing that's addressing a very acute problem today, recognizing that the special projects cannot be an ongoing thing. So the drinking water is a great, the water stations, which we did it. We're the first county to do it countywide. It's now, there's funding in the state budget that's going to do with the rest of the state. It was good public policy. We proved it works. They didn't pay for ours. But it was, but we also didn't have to wait 10 years. And I think that's a good example. And it came in phases. It was first, we set a certain amount of money. And this wasn't a special project per se. This was something, we took fund balance, and it was like $500,000 to start. And we tried to figure out how to stretch it as far as possible. That was basically the middle schools and the high schools. And then, the elementaries. And then we realized, well, we can go all the way with another $500,000. And we did that like the preceding year or year and a half, whatever the distance was. So you're asking very good questions. I think we should all push ourselves to be strategic in how we do these things. Oakland County is a great place, and there's a lot of great events, and I think we should be lifting those up and create those events, and commissioners should partake in them to be there to have a better understanding of the diversity of this county. And it has to do being fit within the confines of our budget. So once we start reaching that limit, then there's harder decisions to be made and questions. And you just heard me say, who's this helping? How many people? What's the scale? What's the ongoing sustainability? Is this a one and done, or is this something we're going to be banking on for a long period of time? Then we need to think about it, which is why I think, because we have the sponsorship kind of strategy and then these other more project-based strategy, that breaking up from a line item, it allows actually for a little bit better planning. Like, what are we planning to do this term? Does this make sense? Are we good? Great. So,
Commissioner Hoffman.
Michael, could I ask you to send all that information, the policy, to all members of the finance committee?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
I would send it to all the commissioners, because everybody's going to have
that would be better, yeah.
everybody's going to have a project.
You're right.
Commissioner Powell.
And also too, I was gonna say to Ajay, is that like, for example, one is gonna come up from the Holiday Extravaganza Parade. I just submitted it. It crossed four, is Waterford, Auburn Hills, Pontiac, and I think White Lake. And they've been going 40 years. So I always try to look at how long they've been going. And now they've ran into, so I'm like, oh, okay, they've been over 40 years. It's a wonderful event. I am a part of it. I love it. And so, yes, this is something. And then I know my colleagues will also support it as well. So I looked at the longevity of it and, oh my God, they need a need. We need to keep supporting them to try to go forward. So I'm hoping my commissioners agreed to support it. So that was just how I looked at that one, as that parade is going in our several districts.
So I guess my question, my take home from all of this is, my communities have approached me to say, hey, look, here are the small projects we're doing as well. So kind of along the lines of 4th of July or parade or summer concert series. And again, maybe I'm still walking away not entirely sure whether or not to go back to them and say, yes, we can do it, no, we can't.
I think the safe is for you to say, you know what, just
try
propose,
it.
write up the proposal, make the ask, and we'll see. I can't promise anything, but I'll let you know, I'll at least make the ask. And we leave it at that, and you safe if we do or we don't. And it's not on you, but at least you put forth the effort and you try, and it's not onus on just you.
Right, and along that, I mean, I think that this is like, this committee and the board as a whole is like, when you add all it up together, is this like a fair distribution of resources?
Yeah.
That we're creating these experiences that in all different parts of the county, a variety, addressing the needs of like all different constituencies. Those are, I think that's the right way to think about it. And it's a mix of art and science. It's like when that policy was being developed, it didn't want to be too restrictive, that didn't let creativity and things that could be a really good benefit. Because I mean, all these things are good. We can't fund them all. Choices have to be made. Some public leaders don't like to say no. I don't seem to have that problem. So I get the delicate nature of it. That's why, I mean, I think it's really important, as Andrew said, do not overcommit, because then you're like stuck, we have to do this. And then it's been a deliberative process made and open around this table, and we'll try some things. We might do it this year, not next year. And that, I think actually will be better to like kind of look at sponsorship and like even like planning perspective, like, okay, we don't have to allocate all the dollars. What are we thinking about? And then do things have to be moved around to address that going forward?
I like the idea of splitting the sponsorships out as a separate line item. I do, so that's good. We'll do that this year. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? I guess I'm glad we pulled all three of these together to have a discussion on the whole topic. So let's go ahead and prompt the vote on items F, G, and H.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 1 nay.
Okay, motion carries. Next up, we have item 9, Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee recommendations. Item 9A is establishment of the Oakland County Acorn 2 Oak Youth Mini Grant Program. Need a motion? Commissioner Hoffman, Commissioner Rahman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having us here. I have with me today Susan Holliday from Leadership Oakland, which we'll talk about why she's here in just a minute, but thank you so much for the opportunity to come talk to you about the Acorn to Oak program, which the county executive announced in the State of the County just a few weeks ago. So this program was really inspired by the young people in Oakland County, some of whose stories we told that night, and it's intended to provide mini grants of up to $1,000 for young people ages 8 to 18, so that kids can pursue, as the county executive said, their passions, their talents, and their dreams. So when you think about this a little bit, these grants would help young people pay for one-time expenses related to educational, entrepreneurial, creative ideas or opportunities. Some examples could include seed money for a nonprofit or a business endeavor, funding to participate in like a national competition, or needed equipment to participate in an extracurricular activity. So this resolution that you're considering today proposes that the grant be housed at Leadership Oakland, a nonprofit who I think probably everybody here is pretty familiar with. So many of our county employees have been part of the program. So I asked Susan Holliday to come here and talk a little bit about Leadership Oakland, why it's the right partner, or why they're the right partner to have in administering this program. So Susan, you want to say a few words?
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Holliday. I am the Executive Director for Leadership Oakland. I've been with them for 11 years. We are a nonprofit organization located in Pontiac. And we have 2 programs that we offer. One is a 9-month leadership program for professionals in Oakland County. We have 50 individuals every year go through this program. We have 1,500 alumni in the county that have participated in that program. We also have a Junior Leadership Oakland program. It's a 3-day workshop that we do for all high school kids. So any high school student in the county and even in the region can apply to this 3 days. It's a free workshop for for them. We are doing this for our 15th year this year. We get typically 40 students from about 20 different schools in the county that we bring together for that workshop. So we have already been working with the school districts. We have a great relationship with Oakland schools, with the superintendents, with the counselors to get our word out, to recruit students for this. So tying in this Acorn to Oak program is a natural fit for us. We've got the relationships to do the marketing side of it, and then we also have the application process. And he's going to talk a little bit about the structure of what the committee will look like to identify, does this person who applied, does it fit the criteria, and then vote on how much should we administer to that. So again, we've been around, this is our 34th year, located in Pontiac. I've taken it to my board of directors and have full commitment from our board to really help our young youth in this county. And so I'm super excited. I'll give you one example about a young lady who went through our Junior Leadership Oakland program. She was a junior in high school, and the next year she started her own cupcake business. And we actually hired her to come to our annual event and to serve her cupcakes. So it's stories like that where you have this passion, this creativity, they get confidence, and it gives them a way to go and do something with it. So we're super excited to partner with Oakland County and continue that relationship and to help our youth in the community.
And so I would just pick up there, as Susan said, this resolution would create a steering committee for the program with 2 appointees of the county executive and 2 by the chair of the board. Among the things that the steering committee would do, as Susan mentioned too, would be to both help with marketing, evaluate the applications that we get for grants. We had initially envisioned that committee helping to determine the scope of the grants too, right? What kinds of things very specifically would be eligible and what kinds of things would not. There was a discussion at Lago yesterday. There was an interest among some members of the committee who would like to actually have more details about what that scope could be in advance of the full board meeting next Thursday. So Chairman Woodward asked the administration if we could provide a one-page document with that information for you, which we will do for the board no later than Monday. And frankly, we could well have that to you in the next day or two, but before the end of the week, just so folks have that as they're considering this at the full board meeting next Thursday. So with that, I would take questions.
Commissioner Woodward, followed by Commissioner Powell.
Yeah, and just that last point that I want to point is like once that scope is there, we would amend and if this advances to the full board, we would be an attachment to the resolution. That would be the scope that's used by this oversight committee, this advisory group, to vet applications and requests for the mini grants, and then there will be a regular report to report to Lago.
Commissioner Powell.
What is the launch time of this? When do y'all plan to really start kicking it off, having people apply? I got a 2-part, but that's my first question.
Okay, well, I think part of our desire to actually get this passed now is so that we can start to get the marketing plan in place. I don't know, we haven't really talked specifically, but I would certainly want to see this launched in time for the new school year.
That's what I was
don't see any
thinking
reason
as
why
well.
we couldn't do that.
So you all have on here 8 to 18. Some 18-year-olds will be first year college students, or is this just structured just for high school students?
No, it's
right. K through 12. Is it just K through 12 have to be in high school? Because 18-year-olds are graduating as seniors and going to college, so they may still be pursuing their business or entrepreneur, whatever. Will this be something for them, at least? Because y'all say 18.
Sure, we defined it by age. We didn't define it by K through 12 or third grade through 12, and if we're thinking about starting at age 8. So I suspect, now look, this is one of the things that we're gonna.
This is why I'm
Yeah,
asking.
yeah,
The only
yeah.
reason why I'm asking is because right now, my daughter has 2 entrepreneur degrees,
Mhm.
2 entrepreneur businesses. So if she's turning 18 May 14th. She's going to college. Would she be, well, I know it's conflict of interest for me, so she can't apply, but in a student in her predicament, could they still apply for their, entrepreneur stuff?
That was the intent, is to go by age and not by grade in school.
And remember, this is competitive, right? So, you know, there's a certain amount of money. We really hope that this is as successful as we think this is gonna be. We're gonna get a ton of applications. And so, you know, the committee that is kind of scoring, making decisions about these awards are gonna have to take all kinds of things into account to make those decisions, so.
So I was just thinking of my child, and I said, okay, well, she's going to college, and if a student wanted to, they should still be able to if they 18, so thank you. I'll refer.
Commissioner Rahman, followed by Commissioner White.
Just a quick clarification, 250,000 is the total bucket, correct?
Correct.
So we're anticipating round about 250-ish awards?
Could give
up to-
right, 250 at 1,000. I mean, if we have people who need $500 to get some equipment to, you know, to start a cupcake business, and what they need are more pans and things like that, right? I mean, so it could go beyond 250 people. When the money runs out, the money runs out.
And it's just a rolling time frame.
That's correct, yeah, yeah.
Commissioner White.
And your daughter could apply because it's Leadership Oakland's a nonprofit. It's,
But it's two commissioners sitting on the
well, as
oversight.
long as you're not sitting there.
Is that true?
As long as you're not.
Well, we'll talk about
We'll
it.
talk
We'll
about
talk
it.
about
There
it.
might be some like rules that we're gonna have to.
Cause I
But-
sure am.
But we can hang out at
Single
like Wipers Leadership Fund.
We do have our Junior Leadership Oakland
We have a separate.
program starting in June. I welcome her to come to that.
Yeah, but you know, helping her little business would help, so I get it.
Commissioner White, did you have anything else? Commissioner Powell?
Where are them funds coming from? The 250, where would it be coming from?
Yeah, from revenue sharing funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually a really good point because, I mean, at least in terms of forecasting, and the idea is hopefully this is a sustainable program on the situation where state revenue funds drop, then there's an adjustment, I mean, that's where the revenue stream comes. There may be an adjustment, a reduction to deal with the economic reality at the time.
So we'd address this in the budget process each year, right? So.
And having it at a nonprofit like Leadership Oakland with 1,500 alumni in the community, we may have alumni that say, wow, I really value what this program is and make donations, which we would be able to accept, right? To add to that bucket of money if we need it.
Okay, anybody else? I have a couple of questions. I think you touched on it, Chair, and that is, you're expecting this to happen every year.
Correct.
And it'll be coming out of the revenue sharing piece of the budget every year.
That's
So
correct.
this is not a one-off. My other question is participation income based? Because I heard I listened in on the Lago meeting yesterday. And I heard you talk about a musical instrument, for example, as somebody who, I have music people in my family too. But, you know, when I was buying a musical instrument 20 years ago, it was $600 for a clarinet or something. Okay, so I could afford that, and the kid sitting next to my kid maybe couldn't. Would both of those kids be able to apply for this? Or, you know, how are you gonna evaluate need? If you were gonna buy musical instruments across the board, you can't do that, right? Right. So,
Remember we talked about saying no? The last resolution.
well, that's kind of my point though, is, I mean, this could get a lot of mess in it real quickly if we don't have those points defined. I know we want to make it open to anybody who's got a great idea out there and is young, and we want to encourage that, and I'm all about that. But you only have one pot of money, and we want to be fair. So
Sure,
have you thought about that?
I think we can address that in the guidelines that we'll share with the board in the next couple of days.
Because I think the income aspect of it is kind of important. When you're in a community where some communities, there's not a lot of money among the population, but in other communities, there's people with a lot of money and there's people with like not very much. And if this is to help those young people who maybe, you know, their parents can't kick in a little of this or a little of that to get them started. I don't know. To me, that's an aspect of this that maybe needs to be fleshed out a little bit amongst all of you.
Well, and I do think that that's one of the things that this committee can come up with. Well, I think the intention here is to provide guidelines around the kinds of things that would be eligible and the kinds of things that would not be eligible. By giving the committee some discretion to decide how they want to make awards within those guidelines, right? So, again, if this program is as popular as we hope it will be, and we'll get a number of applications. I mean, it seems to me the committee could decide that's something they would consider. And I think one of the points that we made in the cover memo for this is that or in the resolution in general, is that mini grants like this are ways and other programs to try to address inequalities where they exist. So, I mean, I think we need to allow for that. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we require that for everything across the board necessarily, but that would be something that could be allowed.
Maybe that's a factor that's considered in the reviews or something.
Right, but that is, this committee, which would have a couple representatives from the board and a couple from the county executive working in conjunction with Leadership Oakland. I mean, I think they can, we can give them those kinds of instructions to keep that in mind as they're scoring, if that makes sense.
Okay. I think it's a great idea, but I think it's a little loosey-goosey right now in terms of how you're planning to administer it, so anyway. Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
I'm sure you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, next up is item 9B, grant acceptance with the State of Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs for the 2023 Oakland County Survey and Remonumentation Grant. Commissioner Smith-Charles, Commissioner Wiper.
Hello.
Hello, Clerk Brown. Finance Committee.
Thank you. So just a reminder or not, if you never heard this before. So remonumentation, first of all, the money comes from recordings in the Register of Deeds office. $4 is put aside and sent to the state to a big pot of money, and then the state puts out these grants. So we are a donor county. We're getting our money back, and remonumentation is for our surveyors. If you ever see on the ground a round metal, thing, that's the monumentation, in the ground to say like this is a corner or whatever, and it's just to keep sure that our lines are, because they sometimes move over time. Sometimes they get ruined, sometimes they're in the middle of a road and a snowplow will ruin them. So starting last year, we entered maintenance phase. So we get a little bit less than we got all those previous years. This year's actually more though than last year. So, and our surveyors are starting their maintenance in the northern part of the county. So they kind of go township by township and check and make sure that that the monuments are there in place and don't need to be fixed or moved or anything. So I just ask that we get our money back from the state so we can pay our surveyors. Any questions?
Fascinating. We were in coordinated zoning this morning talking about Groveland Township and how some of their lines are not really, their boundaries are not really their boundaries, that they actually are considering the road their boundaries. And so, yeah, this is all part of that. Yeah. Okay, if nobody has any questions, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
I'm sure you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries, excellent.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Next up, item 10, the Public Health and Safety Committee recommendations.
Because I bring good stuff.
Pretty cut and dried, this one. Okay, item 10A, acceptance from the Michigan Department of State Police for the 2023 Paul Coverdell Forensic Sciences Improvement Grant Program. Commissioner Smith Charles, supported by Commissioner Hoffman. For some reason, she really wanted to. So I let her have
Off the table.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So this is our annual acceptance of the Coverdell grant. This year we're getting $72,877. A little over $42,000 of it will go to purchase opioid test kits, and the remaining portion pays a part of a position of a forensic lab investigator. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, anybody? Let's prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay. Motion carries. Item 10B, acceptance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. Need a motion?
That was quick.
Commissioner Hoffman, supported by Commissioner Weipert. Hello.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tom Hardesty on behalf of Emergency Management Division. We are here, yes, requesting grant acceptance for our hazard mitigation plan. Every 5 years, we're required to update the county's hazard mitigation plan with the aid of a consultant. We do this in conjunction with all 62 communities, school districts, other major county departments and divisions such as Water Resources, Road Commission. Actually, when we applied for this grant, it was a 75-25 match. But when they awarded the grant, they used, I'll call it a different pot of money. So it's actually a 90-10. And so that 10% we actually won't match with any funds. We'll be able to do that with staff time.
Cool. All right, anybody have any questions?
Nope.
All right, let's prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Great.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have item 10C, amendment number 3 to the fiscal year 2023 Emerging Threats Local Health Department Agreement.
Number 3 to the local health department emerging threats amendment in the amount of $2,317,990 for various projects under the local health department emerging threats project.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this one or any issues? Comments? Okay, let's go ahead and prompt the vote then.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thanks for coming, Stacy.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
All right. We're getting there. Next up, item 11, Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee recommendations. Item 11A, Access Control Systems Upgrade Project.
I'll move it.
Moved by Commissioner Weipert, supported by Commissioner Smith Charles. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us today. I'm Jason Warner. I'm the manager of planning and engineering with facilities management. And to my left is Mike Crum. He's the chief of building safety with the emergency management division. And the resolution we have here today is for replacement of the access control system in county facilities. So this is the card swipes that we have on the building doors to enter building spaces. The current system was installed in the year 2000. Typical lifespan is about 10 years. So they are past their recommended age. Parts are starting to become harder to find for the existing system. So this resolution will replace all of the hardware, all of the servers. It will upgrade what we have now to a proximity reader, so no longer swiping cards. Same ID that we still use today, but you just be able to place it up to the reader within 6 inches and it will release the door that way. This project is $858,840 and funding is available within the 2023 capital improvement plan. Answer any questions you have.
Anybody have anything? Commissioner White?
We had this earlier, we had this in the other committee, but I mean, the old system is 20 years old, it's obsolete, right?
It is, and it's hard to find replacement parts, and it's also, it doesn't give us the functionality any longer that we need, so.
Would be better security with this than, I mean, is there any of that? Are we worried about?
It's a different technology and it will enhance our abilities. It'll also collaboratively work with other departments within the county. For an example would be information technology, IT. We have our printers and that we're putting out into the facilities, and we're using our ID to access the printer, to scan or other functionality that you can't use with the magnetic strip. So it's the proximity that allows us to do that.
Commissioner Smith Charles.
Yeah, I remember from the preview of this a couple weeks ago when Whiteford and I met for EDI preparation, that there was talk about a confidential list. And I was like, oh, where's the confidential list? Because, if it's confidential, I want to see it. So just as a reminder, I think it's this document that doesn't say confidential. I really wish it had a watermark. But is this the one we keep to ourselves? And so just as a reminder, because it doesn't actually say it on our document, and I don't want anyone to be confused.
Oh, Lord, well, staff need to remove it.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Hardesty was talking about when this happens, we may have to have everybody actually wearing their badges all the time. If we do that, can we give all 5,000 employees a lanyard that says Oakland County? Because, as part of this project, or one of those stretchy things. I mean,
I collect them.
I have a heck of a time with my little badge because I don't always have a place to hook it or whatever.
So we do have lanyards and also the clip. I saw you
Yeah,
show the
she has her
clip on
clip
the
one.
side. We have those and we do supply those with the badges. So if you don't have one or if you need one, you let me know. We'll absolutely get you whichever one you want.
I want one too.
Okay. We have a
I
few
just think if
different-
that's gonna become an issue and you have to have a visible badge, we need to make it easier for people to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, a little thing. All right, let's prompt the vote.
See, I got my other job going on. Got that clip, but I don't like the clip.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Next item is 11B, FY 2023 roof restraint system, safety system projects. Commissioner Smith Charles, supported by Commissioner Powell. Okay. Next up, is this still you?
This is still me, yes.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
No, we don't want people blowing off their roofs.
We do not, no. So this is also a capital project. It's planned in the 2023 CIP. This project here will provide roof restraint systems, fall restraint systems to county roofs. Our maintenance workers and contractors, when they need to access roofs for filter replacements on the HVAC systems, general maintenance repairs. Sometimes they are required to work within a certain distance of the leading edge of the building. So these systems are planned. We've worked pretty closely with risk management on these to install on all roofs where workers are working. Our maintenance workers are already trained and fitted with harnesses and lanyards, so they'll be able to just go in and clip into these systems and then they can work safely onto the buildings. So this resolution here will address the jail, public works, a couple roofs on the courthouse here, and then the patrol services and Little Oaks facilities, which we are planning to re-roof with this 2023 CIP program as well. And that resolution will come to you at the next meeting.
Okay, any comments or questions? let's prompt the vote, please.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our last regular item, which is item 11C, the conference room renovation at the Water Resources Building. Need a motion? Smith Charles, followed by Commissioner Powell.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Varg, I'm the Chief Deputy Water Resource Commissioner. This is Steve Korth, he's our Chief Manager. We were in front of the EDI committee earlier. This is about a conference room upgrade that is, our conference room is old and seriously underutilized due to technology challenges and space challenges. So it's time for an upgrade, so we're asking for that today.
Commissioner Powell.
Question on the proposed layouts. You are switched from chairs on the side to chairs behind, probably the projected speakers, and the screen is right there. Why was that? Because it's like, yeah, why was that? Is that just something new modern that they're doing now, or is it a concept? Why? Because I just think, in my personal opinion, you know, sides, the way it looked like, at least how it was currently structured, is just more feasible for a community. And then for it to be behind the speakers, or, you know, just behind, I don't know, it's just how my brain was thinking right now. I don't really, it's not a big deal in my vote, but I just want to ask.
Good question. Steve,
Sure, I can comment. We tried to allow as many chairs as possible. And that was the cleanest way to get the most folks in the room. There's also a separate piece of furniture, a credenza, that's off to the side that impacts the other setup that you were referencing.
Oh.
And regarding the screen being on the only one side, like behind board members or speakers, there's actually gonna be another screen on the other side of the room, so everybody could see no matter where they're sitting.
See, at least I just asked. Thank you.
I should give facilities credit for all of that. They did the design and layout, and they knew exactly what we needed.
Okay, thank you. See,
Commissioner Rahman.
Quick question, I apologize, I missed the EDI committee meeting when this was discussed, but I'm fully in favor of it. But I guess my question is, the dollar amount seems rather high to me. Again, I don't live in this world, I don't know what is involved. Project cost estimate of $173,000 to basically remake a room. Again, please excuse me, I don't mean to dumb it down, but it seems like a lot of money to basically redo this kind of room. So if you could just walk me through a little bit, maybe at a 40,000 foot level.
Sure.
So I have a better idea of
This
kind
is
of
not
what's.
a dumb question. The same question got asked in the earlier meeting, so please, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, although it's just a conference room, we're replacing, the lighting, upgrading it to LED lights, changing out the fixtures so the lighting for their meetings is a little bit better. Painting, flooring, all of the electrical and AV work that's required for the technology. There's gonna be speakers and microphones in the ceiling, similar to what we have here. The screen's gonna be a touch screen, all of the furniture. There's also a few architectural renovations or alterations to the space. They have some closets that are built in that are gonna be removed, which will make the TV or the screen area work a little bit better, and the flow of the room, will be a little bit better there. So although it is just one small space, there's a lot of different components to it. That's why the costs are where they're at.
Okay, and I trust that the bid is competitive?
Yes, yep. All of our consultants and all of our vendors that we use have gone through the competitive bidding process with purchasing.
Okay. Do we have an idea too, because it also says not to exceed, do we have an idea of kind of what the true, or I guess what are we targeting? Are we thinking it's going to come in at that 173, or is that the absolute top dollar of this?
So the 173 would be the top dollar. We do have some contingencies in here. We have a 15% construction contingency. That's for anything unforeseen. If we open up a wall and find there's something in there that we didn't know was in there at the time, that would cover that. We also have an inflationary contingency, only because of the market that we're seeing right now. When we get bid numbers, most vendors will only hold those for a maximum of 30 days. Pricing of material and labor has fluctuated quite a bit. So we're adding that additional contingency just to make sure that we're okay with that. So our anticipation would be that it would be the final cost would be a little bit lower than what we have here.
And then do you have a time frame when you're hoping to, assuming this all passes, when we're rolling this out?
Do you recall what the schedule, I know we do have a schedule, I don't have it with me.
Yeah, we were looking this fiscal year to implement the project.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you guys very much, and I appreciate the fact that there's a contingency in here, but I know the construction costs are coming down now, and I can't imagine a 20% inflationary contingency. That's, let's just hope it comes in at the 128, 253, but I understand they have to have safeguards, but man, that's a lot of money, as somebody else mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I'll just throw in that it stays in Michigan because the procurement happens with, which I guess Michigan is in the furniture business, of quality, sturdy stuff. And so it's out western Michigan, but I was happy to hear that earlier that we're purchasing not just American made, but Michigan made. So.
I just have one. Is this the upstairs conference room that you guys have? Okay. I think I've only ever.
I mean,
Yeah, it's not a good
that
room.
building's old, right? And it's a lot of technical, and COVID got you to learn how much you need that room, right? So.
Exactly.
That's right. Okay, anybody else? Seeing no one, let's vote, please.
I gotta race back over to the city. Okay.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll have to invite us to a meeting in your conference room.
We will.
All right, next item is our second public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address this committee at this time? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Is there any other business? Commissioner Smith Charles.
Yes. I know you all probably saw these in your inbox. They're hard to miss. And I just have to go on record and say that this just looks like a waste of paper and ink. Why is it so big? Am I supposed to post this in my house for my family? Because this looks like it goes in a break room, which is appropriate, but not for all our mailboxes. And this happens all the time. We get these big old things and I recycle it immediately. So I don't know who thought this was good or who keeps thinking it's good, but I would offer to look at the line item on how much this stuff costs. And we could use that money in a much better way. I don't need this. This is wasteful. This is pork spending. We don't do pork around here. The other thing is I heard from Parks, and I don't really know where this goes, but they have a big lag of jobs that aren't being filled because it seems like there's a huge time gap between them going to the executive's office and saying, hey, we have jobs. Can they get on the website? They've got a bunch of jobs sitting there 30, 40 days it's been on the website unfilled, and it seems to be a little bit of a breakdown between Parks and HR in terms of getting those jobs posted. And, being on the Parks Board, it's hard for me to sit back idly and just be like, oh, well, things happen. So again, not sure cart or horse, which comes first, but.
A horse.
I think it's a problem to be. I think you point out a real problem because I had somebody who wanted to get a Parks job last year and could never get through the HR system and finally was like, I'll do something else.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not good.
Because a lot of college students, to your point earlier,
and it was a young person.
They've already made plans.
Right.
They already know what they're doing for their summer. It's just a summer gig.
Right.
So I feel like we're missing the mark there in service.
I agree. I think that there is a disconnect with HR and these, especially the part-time jobs where we need to interview, hire, get them on.
They're seasonal. They're here, but they're gone before you know it. So I just want to make sure I brought that
up. We shouldn't be making that harder. Yeah, Commissioner.
I have a question then. You're on Parks and Rec. Have they taken the initiative then to contact HR? So just so we can
Yeah, I mean,
solve
you know,
that problem.
we all know Chris. Chris is not a sit back and wait for
No,
something
he's
to
not.
happen.
So
And,
he's gonna follow up, that's like, is my question.
I would think that it would help if we could encourage encourage across the street to just get her done. I mean, I wanna it doesn't seem like a big lift, but again, yeah, I think he has had those conversations and
Okay. I just don't want it to stop right
I was
here.
talking to somebody from Water Resources earlier today about hiring, right? And somebody who might be interested in the job, and they said, let us know, give us the name, and we will help them navigate the mess that is HR. And so I do think there's a systemic kind of thing that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
So, Commissioner, good morning.
Hi.
Commissioner Gershenson. Starts with a G.
One day, we really do need to talk about HR and the hiring. Okay, I'll just leave it there. The thing about the posters, because I'm an avid recycler, it makes me crazy too, but you have to realize it's only 19 of them that they're giving to us. The rest are posted in the appropriate places, so you know, if you order 200, they just put 19 for us, but it's still worthy.
that makes sense.
And things should always be printed on both sides. It's still worthy to remind people forget.
Yeah.
But I don't know who would be the correct person to kind of delve into that quagmire of HR.
Yeah.
I don't know what committee.
Lago.
Lago. Thank you.
Commissioner Powell.
What I will let my colleagues know is that me and Dave recently had a meeting with HR, and it was to talk about a lot of the cultural you know, things, and DEI was on there, and he enlightened us on some things that they are working on. So I will say, if we do eventually request them, just know that everything that y'all possibly kind of mentioned, it is kind of in their radar of assessment of things of what is going on and how are we going to correct this moving forward. And I think too, because Mr. is it Sunil? Yeah, he just kind of got in his space. I think it would be good for us eventually to ask him to come aboard and give us an update. And we send him a list of things that we are concerned about, and we kind of see where they're at, even with him just starting to say, okay, and know that these things are on our radar.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So I think that, just know that it's good that I'm happy to hear my colleagues sharing the same sentiments of things and y'all hearing the same thing. And it's good to maybe pose for him and DEI. I think it's good too, for us to request for DEI to come before us as well to give us an update on a lot of the things that they're doing, because they have things in place to address this cultural concern here that we have in our different departments. So it would be great to enlighten you all of the update of where they're looking at of that issue and just other things that DEI is working on too. So
That's a good idea.
And I agree with that 100%, and I know those conversations are having. What I'm talking about is a systemic problem with the merit system. And I learned that that was a vote of the county to put us on the merit system. So it is not gonna be an easy thing to change, but the merit system itself, to me, is problematic. It's got a lot of issues, and that's a much deeper discussion because that would require a vote of the county to change. But I
County commissioners, you mean?
No.
The voters.
The voters.
Oh.
The voters put it
Are
in
you
when we voted to establish this kind of government, the county executive government, it was on that ballot.
Okay.
Wow.
So that's part of the problem. They're dealing with a system that is so horrible.
Messed up.
And so, but that's what they have to do. So all these little extra things they're doing are great. But the real problem is the merit system, I think.
No, it's just another level.
When he comes in front of us, we can talk to.
Well, that's why I suggested that we send him a counter list of things the commissioner want to know about. And first thing we can start, priority order, merit system. What are we gonna do, you know?
Would this be Lago that this would come before, do you think?
I don't know.
Certainly it could be Lago, and also the finance committee will have their budget hearings, and we can communicate prior
that's a
to
good
the
idea.
department heads that this is a topic of interest.
Yeah, good.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I use a pencil, but you don't.
You know, I got that, yeah.
Commissioner
I
Hoffman.
don't want, I have to be somewhere at 2:00, but in 25 words or less, what's wrong with the merit system? Because I'm not sure exactly the criteria and how it works and everything, but.
Well, it ties our hands in so many different ways. And even in the advertising and the steps they have to go through to get a candidate who we've recommended, who we know is a great candidate, but they don't pass those certain stupid steps
Okay.
that they have to go through that are ancient steps, but doesn't a personal recommendation mean anything? So, and I'm not wailing on HR, cause their hands are tied.
No, I get it.
But it's the system that really we have to look at.
Okay.
How many of us have recommended this highly qualified person we know and they don't even get a call back?
I've never been able to get a person I recommended to be hired at Oakland County who actually got through and got hired by Oakland County. I look at folks like you and I think, how did you get hired? You know, I mean, really.
I refer.
No
I
offense,
mean, you're
Pam.
totally qualified and all that,
Yeah,
but you know,
It's a process.
it's a process to get through, you know, and you're right.
I refer.
Yeah, cause just to give an personal, my sister applied here and she was when she was trying to work in Treasury. And Meisner really, she actually vetted out from the candidates that he referred and who he was choosing, but she didn't make it through the merit. He was devastated, so it is what it is. That was before I came commissioner though, yeah, so. Okay.
Okay. Good topics. Any other business? If not, I call this meeting adjourned at 1:28.
If you
Way too long.
Sorry.